It's Wellness Wednesdays. It's Wellness Wednesdays. And again, Healthy Conflict Workshop this Sunday. Check it out. It's going to be good. It's going to be informative and fun and all that good stuff. And as promised on Monday, I'm unpacking more of what we talked about on Monday in a more like a more general thing. Because one of the things that frustrates me about talking about this stuff is because we have these social constructs surrounding gender. The minute you try to talk about any specific experience, you get somebody going, but. And that's not helpful. It's absolutely understandable if someone's coming from a wounded place. But sometimes men need stuff tailored based on examples applicable to men. Sometimes women need things tailored to, be applicable to women. And it's important to see the other side as well. I like it that some women watch Manly Mondays. Because it is very important to understand that other side. And you'll notice I talk theory regarding gender with women a lot. I'm going to delve into something that I only have, I've listened here. I've been on the receiving end of it. I may get some of this wrong again because I may not totally understand what I was told. So, caveat there. If you like this kind of content, we're gonna delve into the whole selfish thing and why that's such a mind trap. If you like this stuff, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. I do Patreon videos talking about stuff that I don't want to get screamed at by putting on the regular internet. I share stuff I enjoy. I share stuff I'm excited about. It's kind of info dumpy, but you guys love that stuff. And I don't bother putting it out in public because I put boundaries on my happy. Patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K, or sign up for one yourself, or come to the Healthy Conflict Workshop this Sunday at 1 p.m. Tickets, $10 in the description box. Join us, please. It'll be great. Okay, so the whole selfish thing. I used to get called selfish by family members a lot. Selfish, ungrateful, this, that, the next thing. I have never been a selfish person. The problem is it's the opposite. I'm a little too self-sacrificial. And every time I wanted something, not every time, but too often, I wanted something or something was important to me, you're selfish. You're being selfish. Don't be selfish. Don't be negative. And it left a hole in me. And I decided not to do that to other people because, in the process of filling that hole, I realized how damaging it is. But I see so many other people just thinking that hole is normal and the way things are supposed to be, and creating holes in other people with that stuff. And it's not just selfish. It's any of that, any of these accusations of states of mind, that tends to be people projecting. They believe that's why they did things that sounded a lot like what you're saying, so that must be the reason you're doing it too. Which is the whole culture war thing of, every accusation is a confession. Yeah, male feminist allies. You know, any guy who says with a straight face that, radical feminist 101, men are dangerous, women need to be protected, women's only spaces have to exist because men are dangerous. Red flag. Red flag. You know, there's no one fucking that. That's a terrifying assumption. Because the data's not there, right? We know that it's a tiny minority of men committing the majority of the abuses against women because each one does it to multiple women before they get caught. It's an escalation pattern. So if there's a guy who thinks all men are like this, run. And guys too, not just women. Guys, don't be around guys like that. It's one thing to say, look, we need to understand how certain systems that were designed 50, 100 years ago with men either exclusively or predominantly in mind mean women have to work harder to get the same results. That's one thing. But that's about structures, not intentions. And so often, people lose a fight or lose a debate. And by lose, I mean it becomes unproductive and they're not going to get what they want from it. A lot of times they don't know what they want from a fight, and that's a problem. We're going to talk about that on the weekend at the workshop. But sometimes people knew. They want something important validated in themselves. And they lose the ability to get that because they made an attack statement at the other person. And anything you do in a fight, a debate, anything, you dish it out, you better be able to take it. And you don't get to say, no, that's not the same thing, because to the other person it is. And so if you start flinging names, you're selfish, you're lazy, you're stupid, remember this one guy. I love fighting about first principles because so many people don't understand them. And one guy, it was hilarious because you're really bad at this. And it was hilarious because he was somebody that didn't understand the concept enough to be able to judge whether I was bad or good at it. And the funny thing is that I was trolling him a bit by that point. It was on Twitter. And so the fact that he was so flustered that he felt the need to take that shot, under his skin, successful trolling, because the guy was being an asshole. And that's the thing. If you come on someone like a ton of bricks, you don't get to complain that somebody came back in kind. And that's why self-awareness is so important. And that's why I'm a big believer in using as little velocity and as little proverbial force to make your point as possible in a sensitive conversation. Our dialogue is infected by the language of protest now. And protest slogan, protest jargon, that's for the protests. You got the sign, you're yelling, you're repeating, everything like that. It's got to stay there. Because that's about making as much noise and getting as much attention as possible. It is not about nuance. When you're trying to solve a problem without destroying a relationship, nuance is your friend. Knowing when you're having a right versus right discussion or a wrong versus wrong discussion versus a right versus wrong discussion. What does that mean? Well, take the example of, I use it because it's just what people understand, right? trans rights versus safeguarding, say with children. It's best to give the person a benefit of the doubt that they actually are existentially terrified of children being abused. I personally believe that a lot of the people that are really hopped up about that were probably abused as children themselves and can't admit it. And statistics back me up on that. 1 in 9 girls, 1 in 20 boys was abused sexually as a kid. That's a staggering number. That's a staggering number. You know, a full 5% of boys, a full 10% of girls. Yikes. More in girls, 1 in 9, not 1 in 10. Like that's staggering. But they don't want to admit it. And so they project. And the most common abusers are cisgender men, which explains why, you know, the focus is the way it is in the discourse. Now that's very real. And just because these people are dead wrong about trans people doesn't mean that that's not a valid concern. And the data just doesn't support shutting down drag shows as the way to reduce abuse of children. But that doesn't mean you have to assume they have ill intents. If they're gleefully using clobber words, well, yeah, there's some indications they're just screwing around. But it's better to go into that assuming the person who's disagreeing with you has a sincere concern until it starts proving otherwise. When they're not responding to any data you give them, when they start going, why are you a pedo, they're not serious then. That's evidence. But you don't start off insulting someone and expect them to take it in order to have a conversation with you. And that's what I see so many people doing. And on the trans thing, I see it all the time. But I also see it with the term selfish. You know? And like I said in Monday's video, if you truly believe you are dealing with a selfish person, you're going to get nowhere fighting with them. Why are you fighting? There's no point in calling a truly selfish person selfish because they won't care. Why? Because they're selfish. So if you're calling a person selfish, expecting that to make them stop, you're being manipulative. And you need to see that for what it is. Because the only people who will care that you called them selfish is a person who's not selfish. Now, it's one thing for a person to come to a conclusion themselves that they had selfish intents. It's not for you to do that for them. And we all do it. We all slip. We are really upset sometimes and it comes out. Nobody's perfect. But this is an example of something that's just structural. It is what it is. And I include myself in this. Now, okay, online again, on social media, I often argue for an audience. So if I'll just call out what I'm seeing in something, like that's a very selfish position. That could be used to show someone the error in their thinking. But again, a truly selfish person is not going to admit it. Or they'll say, yeah, I am, and they don't care. That all you're doing there is, you know, playing to the cheap seats. When it's a one-on-one conversation with someone is not useful. And that's the thing I see in so many of these fights. I mean, Gamergate was back in the news again. And Gamergate hinged on this whole thing that two groups of people thought they were going to get the other to see reason by insulting them, calling them names, and assuming they were terrible people. Gee, why didn't that work? Because the minute you accuse somebody of being a terrible person, and they're not, they're not going to listen to you. And that's the tactical mistake a lot of groups are making right now. You know, that's the tactical mistake with it's not about intentions, only about outcomes. Who's going to walk into that? Nobody with a healthy self-image. Because no, intentions matter. If someone is just repeating something that's learned behavior from their family, they can unlearn it. If someone is doing something because they're a card-carrying racist or, sexist or any other kind of bigot, it's not your responsibility to fix them. And that's a long-term project. Intents matter. I have this one person I talk to, he's a religious conservative. And I keep pointing out to him the difficulty I have in navigating a conversation with somebody who thinks there is no hope for me, that I'm just going to burn in hell for all eternity. My immortal soul will be tortured. And he says, it makes me sad to think that. It doesn't make me happy. And it's like, that is immediately, there is no way I am going to believe he sees me as an equal when he believes that about me. Now, I continue to talk to him because I believe he's overall a good person. He's just been fed a lot of garbage by people. I think his intents are good. But that millstone in his thinking is an issue, and everybody has them. Everybody has them. I don't care who you are. There are certain things I have to be very careful regarding because I have had personal bad experiences with them. And I'm not going to say any of them right now because I don't want anybody to feel called out. Every time I do that, it gets misconstrued and it becomes a tangent, a derail, and not interested. But everybody has them, and it's really important to know what they are. And when someone is feeling overwhelmed, when they feel like they're just giving and giving and giving and giving, and they're getting nothing back, it's very tempting to call the other person selfish, but it might not be true. Now, to give an example for, the right of this as well, because I picked on the left there, and everybody's, you're a secret right-winger. The minute you give any example, people assume that's the whole of you. This is the problem I'm talking about, because now I'm going to do it to right-wingers. Or, you know what? Not even right-wing. There are a lot of left-wing people who don't get the whole pronoun thing. They are otherwise left-wing, but they just don't get the trans thing yet. And here's the thing. Take that off the table. There's a lot of people who, for instance, are given a name by their parents, their legal name, that they don't like. Don't call me Willard, call me Will. I have a cousin. His name's Edward. My grandmother went, he's not an Edward, he's a Butch. And he was Butch from that day on. I don't know why Butch. Maybe Butch Cassidy. I don't know. But he prefers that. He prefers to be called that than his legal name. You call him his legal name, he's going to get pissed. You know? I always thought it was so weird that Bono, the lead singer of U2, his own wife calls him Bono. That's not his real name. Everybody calls him Bono. Okay, if he prefers that, fine. I can't stand Bono, but you know, if people, my sister went at some point. She decided she didn't like the name she was called as a kid. She wanted the full formal version of her name to everyone. Okay, we all changed it. This is what you do to be polite and considerate to someone. And that goes out the window with trans people. When you explain it that way, that this is a way of showing you're trying to get along with a person, you're trying to accommodate them even if you don't understand it. I don't understand some of the things people prefer. I don't need to. That's what they prefer. That's them. I'm going to go with the flow. When you explain it that way, you see what an outlier dead naming and misgendering is. Because it's not about the details. It's about the general concept of people think you're an asshole when they tell you a preference and you deliberately violate it. Not accidentally, deliberately. I don't believe in what you're telling me, so I'm not going to call you that. When it's laid out to you that way, you see what an outlier the behavior is. Freaking people take new names, they change their names, they change their name when they get married, they take screen names, they take, if you're using an anonymous screen name and somebody was constantly calling you by your real name, you'd be pissed, right? That's because you want to preserve your anonymity. That's a big reason a lot of people change their names, not just because they're trans. I knew a guy who changed his name. He was cisgender as anything, but his family had money and they were abusive and he needed them to not find him. And people using his legal name, especially on the internet, made it more likely his family was going to find him. Don't do that. That's a big reason a lot of trans people use a different name. They're not out to everybody yet. There may be some people where there's a physical safety risk. Don't do it. It's not funny. It's mean. And that's the same thing with selfish. If you're not a selfish person, it hurts to get called selfish, right? Do you respond terribly well? And if somebody says, yes, I do. When somebody's telling me I'm selfish, I want to know why. There's an example of my gut doesn't believe that. But I'll give them the benefit of the doubt on that one. Okay, you want to know when you're being selfish and you want to know why. Isn't it more expedient to just jump to why? Doesn't it make more sense to just say what the problem is instead of putting that judgment on it? And I am not saying this as somebody who prefers this way of doing things. I am a solid J on the Myers-Briggs stuff. I am so inner Kratos. Yes, no, stop, go. Systemized, simple, decisive. And I had to learn that comes off as major asshole outside the environments of my own brain. I have to unpack, much like a mathematics equation. I have to show my work so I can get part marks. And I may judge something as selfish behavior, but that's like writing down the answer to a multi-step equation without filling in the steps. And if you do that, no one can see where you went wrong. It's like, okay, there. I'm with you so far. Oh, here's where things derailed. Here's where things went off on a tangent that actually isn't accurate. So instead of jumping to the answer, go to the next line. You're staying up all night playing video games, so you're exhausted the next day. You end up falling asleep on the couch, and I needed your help with something. People get the point. You don't have to say, that was selfish. They get it. That's pretty plain as day. Now, here's the thing. Maybe it wasn't selfish. Maybe this person is staying up playing video games all night because there's something going on, and whenever they try to wind down to go to sleep, their brain starts eating them alive. That's not selfish, that's survival. If you just lay out the issue, you're up all night, you're sleeping all day, I never see you, I need your help with stuff, you're not there, that is more likely to have the person go, okay, yeah, okay, I get it. Here's what's going on with me. And the minute you go, you're selfish, the likelihood that that person is just going to shut down and not trust you with their anguish goes way up. If all you want to do is shut a person up, do it. But that's not even necessarily going to get you compliance. Because I find people, what do they call it? Malicious compliance. They'll do the bare minimum, or they'll be there, but they'll screw it up because they don't feel like you care about what's going on with them. So the longer someone does not feel cared about, and ironically, they think you're selfish now because you only care about yourself. You're not caring about what's going on with them. And then you get resentment and resentment and resentment and resentment. And often people don't deal with what the actual problem is until it's too late and the relationship is damaged, possibly beyond repair. Because it takes, in my experience, it takes significantly more work to repair something like that than to just not do it in the first place. And yes, we all do it sometimes, but that's the thing. You got to pick your battles. You got to save that for something ideally you never do it. But if you're only doing it when you're really upset and overextended, and that doesn't happen that often, that's salvageable. If you're doing it as an opening salvo, you're putting all these cracks in the foundation of your relationships. And when I put it that way, the fact that, okay, somebody's doing something that's having a bad impact on you, but you assuming they're selfish is not considering that they might be going through some shit. That itself is selfless. It's selfish. You're only thinking about yourself. You're not thinking, what non-nefarious reason could somebody have for this happening? And that's why, as I said, in a lot of things, every accusation is a confession. All right, workshop on the weekend if you like this, if you want more tips for how to not cause those foundational cracks in relationships through conflict. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone to use but can't afford it, coffee.com/LeannaK, or attend the workshop on Sunday, 1 p.m. this Sunday. Ticket link below. Please join us. Until then, thanks for watching and be well.